Oh, well, let's go ahead and chant a short opening prayer. Everybody knows this. Ooh. And I think we can all chant this together. Vande Gurunam Charanaravinде Sandarshita Swatma Sukhavabudhe Nishreyase Jangalikayamane Samsarahala Halamoha Shantyai Abhahu Purushakaram Shankachakrasi Dharinam Sahasrashirasam Shwetam Pranamami Patanjalim Om Tat Sat. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Adam and I are thrilled to be here with you all. We would especially like to thank all of, I don't want to call them panelists, all of our friends and colleagues and brothers and sisters. David Swenson, who has been leading the way in the Ashtanga Yoga world since the 1970s, and Danny Saw in Rio, and my good friend Dimitri in Moscow, and Chandana in Pune, Tara in Sicily, Wambui in Helsinki, and Mark and Deepika in Bali. A wonderful, wonderful group of people who have been dedicating themselves to this practice and its teachings, like many of you who are joining us today. One of the ideas that Adam and I had behind this gathering was to collect a intergenerational and diverse group of people from all around the world to talk about important issues, their feelings and thoughts and ideas of things that are occurring in our yoga world, in the larger yoga world, and address it in a way which is relevant to the time we are in now, 2021, as well as perhaps looking a little bit back towards where we came from. As Adam has said, one important way of understanding how we need to direct our path towards the future is to understand what our past has been. And so there's been a lot of self-reflection which has occurred in the Ashtanga Yoga community over the past couple of years. But of course, more needs to be done, and self-reflection is an ongoing part of yoga known as swadhyaya. So we will self-reflect, we'll discuss. This will be an engaging discussion. And, you know, we want you all to feel like you're sitting with us in a living room and we're hanging out talking about things that are important to us. I want to just add one other thing as we begin the discussion today, that, you know, as yoga practitioners, we're all very concerned with how we can create a more just society for ourselves and for the people who live in them. Establish equitable opportunities for people, celebrate diversity, be very conscious about inclusivity, share prosperity, and invest in ways to help all people accomplish the things they need to do in their lives. So I think that we all share these values and others as well. We've been thoughtful about inclusivity and about a variety of voices for these talks. But I also want to add that today is June 19th. In America, this is called Juneteenth. And this is a very important day, a deeply important day in the abominable history of slavery in America. In 1863, on January 1st, Lincoln had the Emancipation Proclamation begin in full effect, is that the slaves, there were 3 million slaves in America at that time, were all freed. It took 2.5 years for that news to reach Texas. The Civil War was ending. There were communication delays and perhaps other things that were occurring as well that prevented this news from getting to Texas. And when it did, 2.5 years later, it was on June 19th. And so June 19th is celebrated as one of the very important days for the ending of slavery in America. However, we still have systematic and systemic oppression and racism and lack of opportunities for Black people and Latino people and Indigenous people in this country. So this year, President Biden has signed the Juneteenth into effect as a federal holiday. So it's officially recognized now as a national day to commemorate the end of slavery. But probably more importantly, it's a day of important reflection for this country to remember what has occurred here. And July 4th is typically celebrated as Independence Day. I'll wrap it up now, Adam. I won't go on for too long. But that Independence Day was a day of freedom for white male Americans. That all men shall be created equal was for white American men. And this was to divorce the colonies from the oppressive rule of the British. But it wasn't for Black men. It wasn't for white or Black women. It was only the Independence Day for white American males. And so this Juneteenth is another opportunity to recognize in this country that that we're not free until we're all free. This is something you find in Jewish tradition as well. We are not all free. We're liberated until we are all free. And I think that is one of the themes which has been occurring full force in the world right now. And it's a very important topic for the yoga communities as well. So I wanted to bring this up, wish everyone a happy Juneteenth, and turn it over to Adam now to begin.
Thank you, Eddie. Yeah, so this is all down to Eddie. I had a certain idea, a slightly easier format, but as always, he liked to complicate the issue and raised a fantastic point that what we need is discussion. You know, we don't just want to hear the old stories again. And or rehash the past. What we need is a collective, discussion about what we're doing now, relating to the past and the future, as Eddie said. So without further ado, because he said a lot of this background, let's get into the discussion. And I'm going to start asking questions, and then we'll facilitate a little bit of debate, hopefully between the participants. So Dimitri, you're up first, unfortunately. And the question I'd like to ask you is, how is the guru Shishya or student-teacher relationship relevant to our current day?
Thanks, Adam.
You're welcome.
Just listening to Eddie, I felt again like 20 years back, I had a dream. How he said, I have a dream. And the dream was to go to India and to find a guru. And now I felt it again, like that time. So it seems like it's still there. It's still kind of needed. Of course, it can't be the same. That's why we're here. But it's still there. And our poll, which we made through Google Forms for the Russian Ashtanga crowd, showed almost the same. 60% of people said yes to the question, I will travel to Mysore to practice with Guru at the first opportunity. Yes, 60, even a bit more, 60% will go. 40 will go, but 40 will not go because of, like they are fine to practice with local teachers and so on, etc. But in Russia, it's nice that Russia is first in the discussion, because it's a kind of different here. I mean, politically, and it's more like Eastern country than Western, somewhat in between. So people are here quite fine, and they still have so not much changed. And one of the reasons, about like 10% of Russians speak English enough, good enough to get the general idea of the situation we are meeting here. So speaking, how to say, language barrier. So I can relate, but I'm also famous for being politically incorrect and so on. So it's better that I don't speak much. Yeah.
Thank you, Dimitri.
Thank you.
Do you have any other thoughts, or anyone else, about the level of or the degree of instruction that can now be offered for a teacher? So I suppose my question is also about whether the guru is the same as it was. Can we expect someone to caretake our lives as perhaps we once did? And what does it mean going to a yoga teacher now? The degree of instruction, the amount of involvement they can have in our lives. Anyone else want to say anything about that? And there was a particular one-to-one relationship. Eddie.
If you want to say something, please raise your hand. And David raised his hand.
Yeah, you know, Texans always have something to say. Well, my personal belief is the guru is not a person. It's the practice itself. And I believe it's a mistake to look up to a person, be the one to guide us, because people are imperfect. The duty of the guru or the teacher is to inspire, to encourage, and to facilitate the practice. Through practicing is where the student gains the learning. The teacher is there to facilitate the using of the tool, but it's a mistake, in my opinion, to view that person as the source, because even the teacher is just channeling to us information, but they in themselves should not be the idol to which we bow to. Their duty is to encourage, inspire. So the teachers that are able to achieve that, that's a good teacher. But also a good teacher creates thinking students, but the best of teachers create students that don't need them anymore and can stand on their own. So that's all I wanted to say about it. I won't go on further.
That's great. Thank you, David. Would anyone else like to comment?
I would be interested to hear, if it's okay for me to ask, maybe if Deepika or Chandana would like to comment on that, since the guru tradition is a Indian or Hindu cultural tradition. It's not a Western cultural tradition. So just from a cultural perspective, either of your thoughts on the importance of the Guru Shishya tradition or parampara?
So, can I speak?
Please.
Yeah. So I'm so happy to hear what David Swenson said. I'm talking softly because our baby's sleeping in the next room. But I so agree with this, because, you know, this is exactly how I feel. So for me, it was so incredible to hear David, you know, who I've looked up to for so many years, saying that, because for me, I really feel like as a teacher, you know, our role is to hold space. Also being a mom now, my perspective has changed a lot. And, you know, I feel like maybe I have more empathy towards, you know, what maybe people are going through. And so maybe maybe there are days where I would not be able to know what somebody is going through, somebody who comes into the room. And so instead of holding authority, I would rather be the person to hold space and have empathy. So that, for me, that's exactly how I feel now. So I guess my perspective has changed a lot over the last few years. And I really resonate with that thought of being a person to inspire and hold space, as opposed to being a space of authority.
Chandana?
So I grew up, again, still in touch with my English teacher. Like, she still corrects if I make a grammatical mistake and everything. And it's what I grew up was showing respect to the teacher. So we had to stand up the moment teacher came in and wish them good morning and, wish them thank you when they left the class. But as David said, that holding someone to that pedestal, because also what we are doing, we are also constantly learning. It's not that we are done. We are not the source. We are also gaining from the source, and we are becoming a channel. So it depends upon, I think, the age we are at. As a kid, I looked up to my guru, I looked up to my teacher, and I'm still in touch with them. I still call them. But now it is always about seeing them as a guidance, seeing them somebody who is going to lead me to what I want to become as. So that is how I feel.
So it's a special one-to-one relationship that's more than just the provider of information, and they're guiding you in more than just giving you information. Chandana, would you like to?
Can you repeat the question again, Adam?
Yeah. So I'm saying they're providing you in more than they're not just giving you information, they're providing more of a sense of guidance or inspiration than that. Like,
exactly.
They're a particular person.
Exactly. Like my English teacher, I was getting my report cards was like full of red marks, and she's the one who actually identified the problem. And she asked my mother to back off, and she took me under her guidance, and whatever I gained in life, I owe it to her. So I will always hold her at a very high pedestal. So, that is how I look as my teacher, look up to my teacher or my guru. So, yeah.
Any of the other panelists want to make a quick comment before we move on to the next question? Just lost my questions, 1 second. Any other questions, answers, comments? So, Tara, it's your question. It's kind of a run-on really from the first question. What do we lose if we deny the traditional structures of the Hindu or yoga traditions?
Okay, well, I'm a little bit of a traditionalist, so I'll speak a little. It is a bit of a run with that. So I think instead of talking about Hindu traditions, because that can get mixed and confused, I think I'll prefer to talk of it as almost like Vedic traditions. Yeah, all of these come under the same branch. So the Vedas, Puranas, Bhagavad Gita, Sutras, it all will come under these yogic traditions. And as most of you already know, right, it's considered the manual for human life. So, I feel like if we deny the tradition and we just want to have the outcome, then it's almost like, it's almost like having a fruit tree, yeah, and just taking the fruit and not watering that tree. So you have the immediate results, but then they fade away quickly. Yeah? And so if you don't last or care for that tree, right? Like you can go to the store, you can buy that apple, easy, yeah? Or you can plant the tree. So if you buy the apple, you're continually dependent on other people. So you have to keep going back to the store, keep going back to the store, yeah? Maybe they don't have the apple one day, maybe it doesn't work, who knows? But if you plant a tree, and you water the tree and you take care of the tree, then you have the fruits again and again. It keeps growing, it's organic, it's natural. Yeah. And so I feel like a practice that's rooted within these traditions is incredibly important to find the depth, find the roots, yeah, to gain the depths of our own practices. So it's not just staying on a surface level. Like how do we get to that, right? So if we follow Dharma, Dharma will protect us. Yeah. Almost like if we don't practice, we won't be protected. Yeah, but it's similarly, how are we practicing and what are those practices? So just I do believe that having staying under the lineage, and when I'm saying the lineage, I don't mean a specific person or an idea, I mean the deeper roots. Yeah, the deeper roots of yoga, not just the physical asana, the gateway as we come into it. It's what's beyond that. Yeah, all of and where we're learning that from are our teachers rooted in these Vedas. Yeah, or they just reading a translated copy from a translated copy from a translated copy, and that's what we're bringing in, or is it coming from the roots? So all of that's my beliefs. Because tradition never loses, right? We may lose tradition, but tradition never loses.
So you think we should know the context of what we're doing? Does it make a difference if we know within the context of the asana what the roots are in terms of our aims and our intentions maybe towards the practice? Or can we just do asana and we'll get the results just doing it? Or ought we to know something about, intentions? Otherwise it's just another way to progress in a kind of materialist, capitalist kind of manner in some respects. Anyone?
Go ahead.
Tara, you go ahead first. It's your
Okay.
your time.
I was like, okay. Sometimes it's where everyone's at, where's the student at, right? If someone's going to come in and say, I want to learn Surya Namaskar, you're not going to start throwing text at them and say, here, read this and this and this. It's, first breathe, learn to breathe, start slowly. Yeah, but at some certain points, I think that roots needs to come in. Yeah, some of the deeper practices, mantram and so that's my belief. I'll keep it like that and jump back in if need be. So if anyone wants to take over, feel free.
Anyone else got any thoughts about that contextualization, the necessary contextualization of what we're doing? Or can we just practice and it will just happen to us? Dimitri.
You can imagine a simple situation where everybody can imagine, like teaching a new student. It's like when you teach him, you will say, almost every one of you, or like our listeners, almost same, like ekam, inhale, even not ekam, like inhale, arms up, and so on. You will teach him Surya Namaskar. But me or like you or anyone, example, will say almost the same words, but the feeling will be, I think, very different there. So because the context, which we are, how deep we are in it, affects, it's like you can say non-verbally. The student, it's like evidently will feel, it might be even subconsciously, how you're teaching from the deep, or like just like the drill. It will affect you 100%. So that's how I see the teaching these days when I teach new students. It still amazes me how it affects. I don't say them, oh, I went to Mysore, oh, I know this and that, but it affects. That's, for example, the context there. It's effect. Thanks. That's it.
Thanks. There was some good points there. Anyone else? The question in the chat box. Chandana, go for it.
As Tara said, that the first time when a student comes in, we are going to start with ekam inhale, but as Dimitri mentioned, the Later, the intention of the practice is what matters. Like, why are you practicing? Where is this practice coming from? What is the meaning behind why are you doing this? What are you looking for? So yes, traditions are important, but it has to be introduced to the student when they are ready.
Would Wambui or Mark or Danny like to weigh in on this? Wambui, I see you nodding your head. Unmute yourself one more time, Wambui.
There we go. I like to be in a practice of if a question is raised, it unravels more and more questions. So that's something I've been doing in my personal contemplation, is like trying to keep things in question form, because then I feel it's just kind of a never-ending process of inquiry. So one thing that's coming up to me is how do we practice a lineage of yoga in what is essentially, at least in some parts of the globe, certainly in the global north, in the West, a post-lineage world. That's where we see this dynamic tension of the role of a guru in quite a position of authority versus a much more egalitarian approach. So that's something that I'm sitting with. And how do we continue to honor and call in the roots of the practice, which have been stewarded by our South Asian kin, while for me, context is extremely important, especially when we look at the socio-historical, political, cultural context from which these practices have come from. So keeping it contextualized is important to me. Yeah.
Thank you, Wambui. Sorry, in the chat box about the inspiration of the teacher, going back to our first point about the teacher and David's point about providing the information or disseminating the subject. Is there something more about, a charismatic figure in your life, an inspiring figure, and how charismatic should that figure be to risk overpowering your own discovery and the asking of your own questions? Danny, do you want to make a comment on any of the above?
As Wambui said, now it's very important to have like a guru, a person to guide you, but it's not like a principal part, about the path. So, but I think it is important to have a lineage. It would be my question, but I think it is important. We live in I live in Brazil. People don't know about Hindu religion or something. So the first impact, I think, is the asana, the physical part. But I think when they start to practice, everything's changed, like Chandana said. So you feel that the students start like Dimitri said, you can inhale, do exhale, we start to do these things like the physical part. But when the students start to practice every day, when they build the sadhana, everything changes. It's natural. They don't need to force themselves to it. So I think this is important. But I think the lineage is important to keep it. Just part.
Thank you, Danny. David.
Thanks for everything you guys are sharing. When we use the word tradition, I'm always fascinated to know, what does that mean? What is the tradition? When Pattabhi Jois was alive, if you went to class one day with him and the next day with his son, Manju, and then with his daughter Saraswati, and then with his grandson Sharat, and then with Sharmila, his granddaughter. You just had 5 different experiences, right? Even when they were alive. And going further, when we say the tradition, the original tradition of yoga was meant for Indian-born male Brahmin kids. So the vast majority of us here, possibly all of us, would be eliminated from that possibility of even doing yoga. That was the tradition. So should we honor that? And it should only be for male Brahmin kids, right? So at some point, it becomes about the information and disseminating it and letting people choose. Yeah. So honoring the tradition is going to be a little different for every one of us up here because we're individuals. We have a different experience. We each had a different relationship with the yoga. Some studied with Pattabhi Joy, some didn't. Some studied with Saraswati or Manju. So the tradition is not a cookie cutter. Yeah, it's not going to look exactly the same. And this is a bit paradoxical, which would be an interesting discussion at some point, the paradoxical nature of yoga. Yeah. So there's the tradition, but it's malleable. But then when it goes too far, is it still the tradition? And this is the paradox that we're playing with. Yeah. To find the balance, yoga meaning union. So somewhere in the middle of all of this is the unity that can encompass all of us with our different personalities and backgrounds and ages. And when we're all gone, Ashtanga will still be happening, and who knows what it will look like. But I just wanted to throw that out there.
Very good points. Very reasonable. Eddie, yeah, I was going to comment. I was going to ask you.
I'd just like to add in one thing. David, thank you for those comments. And of course, everything you say about tradition and what it is and what it looks like, certainly, I think we can all agree on. I just would like to suggest that the idea that the original intent of yoga was for young male Brahmin boys is not accurate. And I see this being repeated in different forums. But the yoga tradition from India has had many different types of gurus, representatives, and saints. There is a big tradition of female saints in India, which is not quite as well known. The Hatha yogis who were writing many of the texts were definitely not Brahmins because the Nath Sampradaya did not consider themselves to be Brahmins. They didn't even consider themselves to be Hindu in later centuries. If you look to some of the most inspirational and influential teachers of India, like Valmiki, Valmiki was a thief. He was not a Brahmin at all. He was transformed through his own tapas. And Gyaneshwar who was a Marathi saint, also was not a Brahmin. So there's many different examples where deep yoga traditions did not come from Brahmins, did not come from men. But in later times, these prejudices seem to have come in. Perhaps a lot of it was from colonialism that seeped into India. But I think that this is an aspect of the Indian history that is, when we talk about context and understanding where things come from, this is an important thing to understand about India as well. So anyway, in the spirit of friendship and also education, I just wanted to add that in. And I know that's not what you were getting at completely, but I don't want anyone to walk away with the wrong idea that is, the entirety of the yoga tradition of India. So I hope it's okay for me to add that in. Go ahead, David.
I still love you,
David.
Eddie.
Thank you.
And thank you for the clarification, but just if we look at the tradition of Ashtanga as far back as we can trace it, there weren't many women doing it, right? I know that you'll see some films of Krishnamacharya and his couple of women, but for the most part, it was men going forward. That was more of my my point. But I embrace everything you said, and thank you for the clarification. And I'll turn it over to someone else. I think Tara had her hand up.
Yeah, I think within Ashtanga Yoga, then we can clarify. We're talking about this particular tradition, and of course when there's a very important movement of Dalits in India also who are not spoken about in the West too, that should be brought in at some point. Anyway, I'll be quiet now. That's all I wanted to add in. Tara, go ahead.
I was just going to add, because yeah, I love this conversation. But that concept of yes, Ashtanga, yes, absolutely, it's a completely different, and yes, started with, as far as I know, yes, same 13-year-old boys, young boys. But with Krishnamacharya, I just wanted to clarify, because I spend a lot of time really studying deeply in that tradition continually, and Krishnamacharya was the one, those women, those are his wife and friends. He promoted the practice of women, and also the practice of chanting for women, which was not discussed and not advised, and still it is confused in many places. So just wanted to clarify that, because yeah.
Thank you, Tara. All right, I mean, we're circling around a nice thread of thinking, and all the questions are just kind of hangers really to just have a discussion. So I'll move on and we'll continue kind of discussing the same thing, I think, in different forms. Chandana, it's your question, and again, it's sort of repeating the same old thing really. Are we teaching anything other than yoga asana here then?
So, yeah, I mentioned in my one-liner bio that, I twisted my life into straight lines, and I did. And this practice has, like 2013, I faced something in my life which could have broken me, but I learned how to overcome that, and I learned how to actually make my life that I wanted to live. And this was 3 years into practicing Ashtanga. Before that, I started my asana journey in 2000, but it was just about, taking a yoga mat and going for these alternate day yoga classes. That is what I was doing for 10 years before that. I actually understood who I was and what I should become. Like the fact that I was carrying this immense anger and that need for revenge. It was, I couldn't do anything about this thing, because the person who did that to me will never be punished in this country. So I had a choice to make, whether I become better in life by carrying all those negative thoughts and negative feelings, or should I just make a better life for myself? So I learned how to let go. So this is what I kind of learned more than just the physical part of this practice. So what I did was I asked a few of my students to share what they learned apart from the physical aspect of this practice. And with the permission from them, I just want to share little tidbits from them in this forum. So student S, she says, I still remember my first few weeks. I was so certain that there were poses from the primary series I thought I would never be able to attain. I was 100% certain about that. And then with that gentle confidence, you told me never say never. Of course, months later, I was comfortably doing what I once thought was impossible. This little lesson has helped me on the personal front too. I realized that just like my body, my mind too can become flexible if I train it too. For someone who resists change strongly, the faith in malleability of mindset is a huge blessing. Then student M, this practice teaches me discipline, managing my 9 to 6 corporate job, a home, preparing food, commute, health, to be social, and life in general doesn't feel overwhelming. The practice taught me discipline to manage everything, taking responsibility of things and not get away with those that I don't like, just like I cannot get away with the asanas I don't like. Student U, better awareness of food habits, starting with being more mindful of the food I consume, eating only when I'm hungry and reducing junk food intake. Also enjoying what I consume with grace and happiness. Deeper breaths, calmer mind, thoughtful responses, and clarity in decision-making. Deeper connection between body and emotion. understanding energy blocks, and improved capability of working through them. Improved ability of to silence and slow down the mind, lesser spiraling and negative thoughts, stronger control over the mind. Then I have student N. The repetition in Ashtanga teaches you that not every day is the same, but the important thing is to show up. You show up, you step on the mat, and you just give it whatever you have that day. I think over time, this helped me to deal a lot with stress in life and in work. The feeling was reinforced that at the end of it, things will work out. I find that now it takes a lot more for me to get frazzled at work than it used to be before. So, it's just like, when we start joining the dots, when we start writing the letters, we always make a crooked line. But then slowly, as we set our intention, as we become more aware of ourselves, when we meet our limitation, when we meet our fear, when we meet ourselves, when we understand ourselves, we learn how to enjoy our cursive writing. So that is how I feel. That's it.
That's very nice. Thank you. I think it's circling around the same idea of tradition, really, and how you would inform. I mean, when you're teaching the asana, or you're just teaching the asana, especially you're in India, or do you try and contextualize it? And then if you talk about tradition, like just as we're talking, how do you, is it the Krishnamacharya or Pattabhi Joy's tradition, or do you frame it in a broader context? Or do you do that at all? Or do you just teach them the asana and that's it? And let them come to it?
As I said, I have never studied with Pattabhi Joy. So for me, Guruji has always been Sharad Guruji. Okay, so that's one thing. And the way I was taught, I was always trusted that, okay, I went to Mysore with a lot of limitations in my mind. I lacked a lot of things, and slowly I overcame it. And when a student walks into the class, it's not just about, okay, he or she is here to do yoga asanas and that's about it. There's a personal connection with the student, and they have been with me for years now. So obviously, this is not just limited to asana practice. There'll be more. In fact, it's as David said, it's about being like a guide to them. So no, it's not just the asanas. Like the intention of why they are coming and why they are dedicating that 1.5 hours to themselves or more should be made very clear. And I constantly keep on reminding them, why are you here? How is this 1.5 hours or 2 hours important for you? Understand that. So I think it's more than that, than the asanas.
That's great. I like that. Yeah.
Let's hear a little bit. Yeah. Let's hear a little bit from Mark. I see him keep on reaching over to.
Well, no, I mean, Mark's got he's got his question. We're also slightly lagging in the time front, so let's move on to Mark's question, I think. And do you want me to read it, Mark, or do you know it? How do we reassess so we will still retain some authority in the role of the teacher, so as to affect change in the student?
Yeah, so my apologies that it's almost 11 o'clock, way past my bedtime here. So it would have been much better if I had had my coffee, but I'll do my best.
All right, let's see if Mark comes back in.
Okay, Deepika's phone died.
Yeah, well, this is our life at the moment,
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so for me, one of the important words in that question is the role of the teacher. So, in our lives, we all have different roles. So right now, my role is as a husband, as a father. I have my role as a son. I have a role as a boss to some people, friend to others. And so sometimes I have a role as a teacher. And as we all of us who are teachers here, and I think that is the important thing to understand, is that we go into those situations. It's like we play that role, people respect and they play their role within that relationship. And then once the class is over, then it goes back to there's we're not being put on a pedestal. So the role is finished and we go back to being friends or whatever it is. So I think that's probably been, with what's happened in the Ashtanga tradition, the lineage over the last, since 2017, after the whole Patabi Joy scandal, I think that really revealed to all of us that we had made that mistake of putting the teacher on a pedestal. And, that's, it's made us wake up to the fact that we can't do that anymore. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a role to play as a teacher. In order to learn something, you still need to give your respect to your teacher and put yourself in a position of being a student so that you can learn. So whenever I go to learn something, I respect and honor the teacher, and I put myself in that role of a student to learn. And when I'm teaching, I also expect the same thing from my students. But I think now, with what's happening in the world these days, I think one of the big words that comes to mind or phrases that comes to mind is decentralized knowledge. Just like we have decentralized banking, decentralized information, the same thing's happening in the yoga world as well. Like all the knowledge and power is no longer with the one teacher. Like for all of us, most of us here, I think, we had to go to India to get the information, or we could go to David Swenson's DVD. But basically, we had to go to India to get the information. But nowadays, really, that's not needed. The information is all there. The transmission of it, that is something different. To really get the juice out of all that information, something different. I think you really need a teacher for that. And I think, hopefully when the world opens up again and we can all learn from each other in person, I think we're all going to value that role even more so, that personal, physical connection. But I think a lot of the hierarchy and authoritarianism, a lot of that, I think a lot of that systemic stuff is going to fall away. And how this tradition evolves with all of that, I'm not sure. It's, we have to wait and see. I'm really not sure how it's going to evolve. I know, for example, in our classes, we'll probably be more open to students developing their own practice, in a sense, like if they don't want to necessarily follow the primary series or the intermediate series, if they want to go off in different directions, then I think we'll be more open to that. Whereas before we were kind of like really within the system, trying to follow all the rules, and somehow that doesn't feel right anymore. I could talk a lot more on this, but that's probably enough now.
Good. That's good. I mean, it's very honest, and it's all good. I mean, what do you think about the authority then? You talked about authority and the idea of role play. That it's essentially just a role play between two people, and then you go back to being friends or whatever. Is that possible?
Yeah.
It sounds like from what you're saying that your classroom is a very relaxed affair where you don't have much authority. You kind of allow the student to be the teacher. No.
No, I think I can be stern when I need to be. Eddie Stern, that is. No, I can be stern when I need to be.
Danny.
I agree with Mark about the authority of the teacher. It's not you don't have to put your teacher in a pedestal, but the respect is really important. And about, you don't need to go to India to learn, no, because now you have a lot of information, but sometimes you have to be careful about how information you are looking for, no, because nowadays you have internet, so everybody can be a teacher. So it's important to find a person that is real, a person that practices, that study yoga. No, so I believe in parampara, like you have Edster here, David Swenson, people that Adam, that learn from Patabi Joyce, learn from good teachers and have the right information. So sometimes I'm afraid about students that looking for many teachers or many information, because everybody today can put something on YouTube. And I think it's a kind of danger. So it's good to have like a source, to a person, a teacher that you respect, to learn from him or her. That's it.
Thank you, Danny. That's yeah. And following on from that, there's an interesting question in the chat box actually. Someone's saying, well, where is it? Do you guys feel there's some kind of responsibility to keep some kind of tradition? I mean, is that something that weighs on you? I think that's a good question. Does anyone want to? I mean, I'm looking at the chat box, by the way, anyone that's watching, so please comment. That's a good question. Does anyone feel the weight of preserving something? And someone else mentioned in the chat box the idea that we should come up with some version of our own tradition as a connection between each other for something that's quite hard that we're trying to do. And we need something. Anyone?
While everyone is pondering that, I'll just pipe in about the word tradition for a moment. The word tradition basically means something which is done the same, but it doesn't have to be done the same for a long period of time. It could be done the same for even one generation, and that creates a tradition. So the way that we use tradition in an English sense, that word doesn't exist within the context of the spiritual traditions of India in the same way. So the word for sampradaya or parampara, all of these words, they don't really mean tradition. They mean something about, they refer to a stream of knowledge which is being passed down in a particular way. And so when we go to a teacher of a particular parampara or sampradaya, we are entering into their knowledge stream. And then when we follow what they instruct, we're entering into that knowledge stream, and then that begins to work on us, transform us, or whatever word that you want to use. So this is a little bit different than the word tradition, which simply means to do something the same, because my grandmother made a pumpkin pie at Thanksgiving, and then my mom made it and she taught me how to make it, and now it's our tradition to have that every year at Thanksgiving. That's tradition. It can be very, very mundane. There's a little bit, so there are two different senses, and there's a lot of questions here in the chat room about what does tradition mean. So just to draw a distinction, that as non-natives, and I know this is something I bring up a lot, but as non-natives, when we start using words, I'm talking about myself now, that do not equate with how language is used in these, if you want to call them Vedic traditions or Sanatana Dharma or the yogic traditions, slight different meanings will come in. We superimpose different types of ideas. So, so it's just, the difference between a knowledge stream and a tradition. And then the last thing I want to say is that in our last 15 minutes or so, I know there are a lot of questions about what does tradition mean? What does Mysore mean? What does the Guru mean? And the topic of our conversation was Ashtanga Yoga 2021, which is where we are now and beyond. So maybe as we go into the last few minutes, we can think about that like a little bit more, like what did we actually want to talk about here for Ashtanga Yoga 2021? Like, and why did we want to do that? So I think everyone has said nice things about that so far, but just to hammer the, the point home one more time.
Yeah, it's a free space. It's a free space for people to, to create together, I suppose. Because also another word for tradition, certainly in the English culture, is conservatism. Keeping things the same. Something traditional is something that, is kept the same. And let's move on. We haven't got much time. So David, you're up next. Would you like to speak on the purpose and role of adjustments?
Yes, I'll just first make a comment on the previous. We have to understand what is the foundation of the practice we're doing before you can understand what you're trying to retain. Yeah. And personally, I break it down into what I call the 5 elements of practice. Ashtanga encompasses certain things. We have drishti, we have bandhas, we have specialized breathing techniques, we have a particular sequencing of asanas, yeah, and we have vinyasa. So when you combine those things, to me, that can form the tradition or the word or the recipe for mom's, pumpkin pie, but that's the recipe. This is choreography. My wife works in the world of dance. If she's staging a ballet, it has certain steps. So primary series is what it is. It's choreography. Tai Chi practitioners practice the same sequence for the rest of their life. They don't mix it up and suddenly make turbo Tai Chi or whatever. So there's elements within that, but even within that structure, there's space and room for personal expression. So I just wanted to mention that. And I don't want to spend a lot of time because I really wanted to hear from the other people more than hearing myself talk, but touch is human. It's human to touch. It's been part of our tradition. Adjustments are wonderful. You don't have to use so many words. Yeah, it's one of the benefits. If you try to tell someone, push down the base of your index finger, that's the finger between your middle finger and your thumb. The base of it is where the corner of your thumb, or you just touch there and say, press down here. You didn't have to use so many words. Yeah, that's wonderful. It's a connection. It's humanity. I miss touch. Yeah, this is great. I'm happy for this opportunity, but I miss being in the room with you guys. I even miss the funk of the smell in the room. Yeah, there's an essence, there's the reality. Yeah. And granted, we didn't have to get into the whole thing of how to adjust, but there's a role it plays. It's a real connection. I have wonderful memories of adjustments, and I've gotten feedback in the same way. If we look at an adjustment as a method or a way of creating a muscle memory, great, it creates a memory. Good adjustment is a good memory. Bad adjustment, bad memory. So if someone is abused or injured or damaged, it's a bad memory, but it doesn't mean that adjusting was bad. When my mother was 80 years old, her back was bothering her. She went to a chiropractor and the guy broke 6 of her ribs adjusting her body. Does it mean that chiropractics is bad and no one should ever go to a chiropractor? No, it just means this guy made a bad adjustment. It was incorrect. So my feeling is we just have to learn how to be respectful. And if any of you have ever been to a Mysore class with me before class, I always announce, I've been saying this for 20 years. If you need an adjustment and I don't see that you want my help, you get my attention, I'll come help you. On the other hand, if I come to adjust you and you don't want my help, you tell me to go away. Empower the student to have a voice. Yeah. Empower the student. Too much power is in the hand of the teacher that the student is frightened. And there's this movement now in the world of, and I was in this meeting in a big, in London, and the teachers were all together and they said, well, with all that's going on, we've come up with an idea. We're going to place cards on the mat. The student that does not want to be adjusted, I don't know what the card is. Maybe it's like a hand with a red line through it or something, but it's a card that when that's there, it says, don't adjust me. And they said, that will empower the student. I'm not a fan of that. I say, no, it's not. You're enabling the student. That's where the problem, when they say, yeah, but the student's intimidated to speak to the teacher. And I said, and that's where the problem is. Why is that there? Empower the student to know that they can look at the teacher and go, no, I don't want that. Yes, as Mark is saying, within there's a teacher-student relationship. but there's boundaries to that, yeah? If the teacher is harming the student has to speak up. What's that person going to do out in the world? If we look at the mat as a microcosm for life and our practice and how we deal with our life on the mat helps life in the world. What are we going to do out in the world? Someone is abusive to us. What do? We pull out a little card and wave it at them? No, we empower. It's training for life. So yes, make adjustments, be respectful, get the student to give feedback, and then it's wonderful. So I'll stop there because I don't want to go on and on. And I know we're probably signing off soon. Just before we do, I'll say, you guys, this is great. I love you all. Thank you for letting me participate in this. It's an honor, and I want to hear from other people.
Thanks, David. So do you ask someone now, David, when you adjust them? Has your idea of adjustments changed over the years? I mean, you've done it for so long. Have you changed the way you adjust or the way you approach an adjustment? It would be interesting to hear that.
Are you asking me, Adam?
Yeah, sure.
Well, you know, I've run these teacher training courses for years, 20, 30 years, and I always teach the same way. I have a list of things you have to look for. You're like, where do we adjust? And I've been saying this since I've been doing these trainings, probably 25 years. I say you always avoid the high voltage regions of the body. Certain places, if you touch them, you're electrocuted, so you avoid those areas you don't touch, yeah? You communicate, you ask, you look in, you understand, and what is the purpose behind adjusting? So my approach has always been the same. I look at myself in a Mysore room like an asana waiter. I'm the servant. Mat number 7 needs Marityasana D. And I serve them Marityasana D. I present them the asana, but it has to be done with respect. My goal isn't to just cram them in there and bind their hands. My goal is to facilitate their practice. I'm serving the needs of the student. The teacher is actually the servant of the student. We're there for their benefit, not for my ego, to make me all feel puffed up. Yeah. So my approach has always been the same. So I've always had this attitude about, and I understand there's heavy-handed adjustments or miscommunications and missteps and things, but it doesn't mean adjusting's bad. It's just something went wrong in the lines of communication where it became one person was just imposing on the other. Like the waiter comes out and goes, I don't care how you ordered that food. This is what you get. Oh. It's not like that. We're there to, and it has to be sincere. But again, there's a respect, and this is the balance we walk between teacher, student, and there needs to be some control, but with respect.
Thank you, David. I'm conscious time is getting on. I think if you're watching in the audience, I think we'll probably approach this question again in some form or fashion in the next panel that's coming on. But I want to stick roughly to time. So Wambui has the last question today.
Okay, so trying to get this all in. Eddie, I'm really glad you brought up Juneteenth, and I do just want to take a moment to read this real quick. The Senate unanimously voting to make Juneteenth a holiday should confuse you. So-and-so reminded us, this is an Instagram handle, reminded us that gaslighting is making Juneteenth a federal holiday while simultaneously attacking Black voting rights, endorsing state-sanctioned violence, dismantling the social safety net, and passing laws to prevent schools from telling the truth of our racist history. Don't be fooled, we've got work to do. May Juneteenth be a call to action to never stop until we're all free. So there's that, just further complicating. So yeah, my question on tradition, how should it be presented so as to retain some characteristics of a structured method while also allowing for greater inclusivity and autonomy? I'd like to just set the tone. The question of diversity and inclusivity has always been on my mind since I started the practice about 13 years ago. Eddie can attest to this when he came to visit in the early 2011s, that time that this was on my mind. And so in 2018, 2019, as I was thinking, well, how can I get more Black Indigenous people of color in Finland to come and do this amazing transformative lineage of yoga that's been so beneficial for me? How can I share all this like beautiful transformative healing medicine that has helped me? Petri and I, on our website, when they went to look at our website, we were accused of spreading casteism and Brahmanism in progressive Finland, right? And so Ashtanga Yoga has been a very hard sell for the BIPOC here in Finland. And so that just, I was really confused because I was like, just kind of, in the lineage, following the parampara, really just doing what I thought constituted being a good student and a conscientious teacher, right? But it really got me like asking questions. And those are the ones I'm gonna just offer that we can sit with. Something that has come in my mind is that we are living and practicing and teaching this lineage-based yoga in a very polarizing time between Hindu phobia on one hand and Hindutva on the other. And so where are we with that? And that's why I was really grateful for Eddie for speaking to the nuances within Hinduism itself, because things get very sort of flattened and we get just dominant narratives on either side. So nuance is super, super important. Certainly a trauma-informed approach to even something that is traditional or lineage-based is going to be, from here on out, certainly something that I and Petri are practicing. David spoke to that in terms of empowering students. Mark has spoken to that in terms of a less hierarchical approach to the role of the teacher. So that speaks to some of the trauma-informed, and not just trauma-informed, but trauma-responsive principles that I'd like to see in our yoga spaces. So harm happens. We just don't think about it and talk about it and know about it, but we actually have like a praxis. We have steps to take to make sure right relationship is returned. And it's hard. 2020 was this big year of racial reckoning, right? Everybody woke up. Where are we in terms of action in 2021? It's slow. So we are maybe more racially aware as a society, but not too much equitable action on a deeply structural level has happened. So this is going to take some time. What else? How to make, rather than safer spaces, how to make softer spaces in our yoga practice that takes into account our aspirations for a just and equitable, diverse society, especially one that's pluralistic, not assimilationist, right? And I will just say, like, where does yoga stop and Hinduism begin? And what do we do with that in terms of a religiously diverse student body? Like, I'm just thinking, like, what's happening in India, no Muslim is gonna wanna come into an Ashtanga yoga class because that's gonna be triggering. So how do I work with that? It's a lot, and that's what I'm trying to envision and imagine, like maybe not safer spaces, but softer spaces. What does a softer space look like? As well, where speaking truth to power is not a big scary thing, and where taking accountability is not a big scary thing. And these are things that we have trouble. Obviously, in the macro society, it's not going to be much different in the macro society of our yoga spaces. Oh, I tried to pack it all in.
That was good. That was really good, and very positive comments in the chat box. And thank you, Wambui. And I think we'll carry that on. I think you've raised some really important points there. Wonderful. And well, I suppose I would like to stick to time, and we've got our next panel in 10 minutes, more or less. So I just want to say thank you, everyone, for coming. And I'll leave Eddie to say one little final note. And thanks again for the audience for listening, and some great interaction. We didn't expect such good questions and interaction there as well. Thank you.
Great. So thank you all very much, participants, for all your comments and questions, and all of the teachers who are here speaking today. Wambui, that was a fabulous summation of everything that was said today, as well as your own thoughts. So thank you very much for bringing that to us. We hope that we will continue. If this is useful for people and you enjoyed this, then we would like to do it again. You can let us know if that seems like a good idea to you, teachers and participants as well. And we'll keep on, bringing in other teachers and other voices. There are people we invited who couldn't make it. We'll invite them again for next time. But deep appreciation for all of you. I'd say probably the last final closing thing I would say is that I think David's summation of what is tradition in regards to Ashtanga Yoga as the 5 elements he spoke of is a good thing for us to hold on to, because when it comes to entering into a yoga practice or a spiritual practice, the first thing we want to know is, what should I do? I'm suffering, something's not right in my life, I'm looking for healing, I'm looking for peace, what should I do? We need something to do. And this is a very wonderful format. And then by doing it, something happens. So when we look at the word tradition within Ashtanga Yoga, we might be talking about, this is a suggestion, this type of a format that David was speaking of, these 5 elements of the sequences, the breathing, the looking, et cetera, et cetera. Add a little bit of gratitude and awe on top of that, and it's a pretty good recipe. And then put in top of that all the questioning that Wambui brings in, then that's very important too, because as soon as we think we don't have any more questions, then we might think we know everything, and that's a dangerous place to be. So I will stop there. Thank you all very much. And everyone who's staying for the next panel, thank you. Everyone who's leaving, thank you. And all of the teachers here, you guys were all phenomenal, amazing. We love you.
So a few minutes break, and then we'll see you at 4:30, everyone.
Thank you, Adam and Eddie, for organizing this, and thanks to all of you. Love, respect.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you,
Thanks.
Adam. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone can stay in the same link, and we'll find the other teachers and pull them up. Thanks. Peace, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, David.
Eddie, if I want to hear the next class, do I remain here or log out and come back in?
Don't log out. I'm going to change your role to attendee, and then you'll be in to listen.
And then I'll be invisible, right?
Not to me. You'll always be in my heart. All right, I'll turn off my video for a couple of minutes here, and see you all in a couple minutes. Hey, everybody. Let me turn off the fan.
Hi, everyone. We're just madly scrabbling to promote everyone to panelists and find you. So we're here again for the second part of our chat today. Michael was outside. I'll hand it over to Eddie and just say thanks everyone for joining him. Hope some of you listened to the first part, and over to Eddie for another little introduction.
Okay, so thanks everybody for joining. I see we're still recording. So we had our first part of the panel. We're going into the second part now. For those who, I think pretty much everyone was here as an attendee for the first part, but I don't know if all of our speakers today were here for the first part. If not, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Adam and I had thought about doing this with not really a super clear direction of what we wanted it to be, other than gather a intergenerational and diverse group of practitioners from around the world together to talk about Ashtanga Yoga in 2021, maybe to take a short look at our past and look towards our future, and talk about some of the important issues and questions and concerns that we might have about what's going on. So that being said, I'd like to thank Shauna and Day and Harmony and Loretta and Mary and Richard and Corey and Michael for joining us today. And thank you. It's a pleasure to see everybody. For those who were not here also in the first part, I did mention that today in America is June 19th. It is Juneteenth, which is a very important day in the history of slavery in America. Lincoln had signed the Emancipation Proclamation, which was the freedom for, or the end of slavery in 1963, and it went into effect on January 1st, but it took 2 years for that news to reach Texas. And the day that it reached Texas, when the Union soldiers arrived, was when that freedom was announced to the slaves who were in Texas at that time. So June 19th is has been celebrated for a long time in America, but it wasn't known to most people, meaning white people, until really last year when it came into the public consciousness. And so I think it's important today to share with everyone who's not familiar with Juneteenth what it is, and that even though there was this ending of slavery in 1865, that much has not changed in America for Black people and Latino people, and certainly for Indigenous people. And that even though this is more in the public consciousness, there is tremendous amount of reckoning, self-reckoning, and work to be done to create a just society and equitable opportunities, celebrate diversity, to be conscious about our inclusivity, and also to share prosperity. And that includes sharing teachings and sharing platforms, and figure out ways we can invest in ways to help all people to have the opportunities they need to grow and transform. And that, as is said in the Jewish tradition, from which I'm from, that we are not free until all of us are free. And the same holds true for racial equality and gender equality and everything. We're not free until we're all free. So I just wanted to bring that up. It's an important day of reflection for many, and an important day of celebration for many. And that's going on here in America right now. So in the spirit of some of those things, we invited everyone here today to gather and talk in an equitable platform. Okay, so with that, I turn it over to Adam to lead us through the questions.
Right, yeah, so I'm the unenviable role of the question master, and first up is Shana. So, Shana, you know your question. It's regarding the modifications, regarding where people might find their health nowadays, how much we ought to modify, different body types. What are your thoughts on that?
Hi. All right. So first off, I'm gonna start by saying that my name is pronounced Shayna, just for y'all to know. S-H-A, like it's S-H-A-N-N-A, but it say it like what has a Y on it. So yeah, Shayna. So thank you for having me here.
Thank you,
I'm
Shayna.
excited. Thank you for having me here, and I'm excited to be with everyone. I've been practicing Ashtanga for close to 20 years. And I remember when I first started practicing Ashtanga, when I went into the Ashtanga room, there were all these different types of bodies. There were people from all different walks of life. Everyone looked different. There was no expectation that everyone was supposed to look the same as they went through their Ashtanga practice and they went on their Ashtanga journey. And I don't know when it shifted, but I feel like it was like within the last 10 years, there was some type of shift where I feel like everyone in the Ashtanga room started to look the same. They all started being from the same socioeconomic class. All their bodies started looking the same. Everyone was expected to be able to do the same postures in the exact same way. And then there's like the amount of time that this was supposed to happen. And then I started to see the shala or the yoga room starting to look completely different. And I woke up one day and basically I was like, I look nothing like anyone in here. No one in here is looking like me. Where are all the like quote unquote average Americans really that don't look like any of this, that don't have the bodies that are hypermobile, that are going to allow this, that don't come from this super privileged environments? Where are all of these people at? So when I think about the work that I do with accessibility, I think of it as just a returning to what it was at some point, that it's really not, it is special because people are doing it, but it's not special. It's just looking at people's bodies and working with them in the places that they are and empowering them to want to stay on the journey of yoga and not quit, because when they look around the room, nobody looks like them and everybody looks exactly the same and all the bodies are same and we're all expected to be able to practice in exactly the same ways. And so for me, when I think about accessibility, it really is the act of being present with each and every student that shows up in the room. That's really all it is. It's not something that is new to yoga. Even, you know, and one we talked about trauma informed, and when we're both kind of in that arena as well. But it's like, this stuff is not new. It's just somewhere we decided we wanted to cookie cutter this out. And even though Ashtanga has this sequence that, you know, it doesn't mean that it's supposed to be this cookie cutter event that happens. So for me, accessibility, trauma informed practices is the way yoga was originally taught and so it's supposed to be taught. Somebody comes in the room, we see this person, we see their body, their lifestyle, who they are, and we teach to that person. That's all it is to me. It's teaching to the individual student, and we can call it whatever we want to call it, but teaching to the student.
Beautiful.
Does anyone else have any follow-up comments on that? Shayna, I'll blame my accent for getting your name wrong, first of all. We don't usually use the large vowels in England. And I'll ask you myself, how do you preserve the essence of the posture? I see you making some really interesting variations to make things accessible to people, but is there a pattern in your mind as to what you're going for? Do you have some certain rules? That would be interesting to know.
So I asked myself, what is the purpose of the posture from my understanding? And what is the person's reason for being here, the person's reason for doing the practice? And how can I bring those things together? I don't really talk about it too much, but I do now have sacral arthritis in my sacrum. So, you know, I went from being able to do like third series to being able, not really even being able to get up and down off the floor. So that really got me to this place where I had to ask myself, what is the purpose of each of these individual postures? And how can I still glean the benefit from each of these postures from the place that I am now? So that's all I look at it as. So if I have a posture, okay, this is the posture that I was taught is Vrityasana. Okay, this is what I taught it's supposed to look like. Okay, but what is this person over here trying to get from this practice of yoga? And how can I figure out how to use the tools that I have available to get them to have those feelings of Vrityasana, whatever that is for them, and still be doing Vrityasana. So yeah, there is like there's an idea, but that idea is still the co-working of me and the student in the actual asana and the yoga. It's all a thing that's kind of put together to form this magical thing that is this person's particular Vrityasana. Not that it has to look like, you know, Adam's Vrityasana or Harmony's or, you know, Mary or Michael's. Is this person's Vrityasana. And that's what I do.
That's nice. Anyone else want to follow that up?
Say something.
Richard and I would like to
Are
say
we unmuted?
Yeah.
You're good.
I unmute.
Thank
Miracle.
you for unmuting me. Yeah, thank you, Shane. What goes on internally in the posture is really what counts. And so you can be an extremely injured or stiff person and do Ashtanga Yoga beautifully. And eventually, I hate to inform you of this, we're all going to be injured and old. And so the people won't be able to tell which posture you're doing. Is that a back bend or a forward bend are you doing? But what's going on inside, that's what makes it, that's the real juice of the posture. And so eventually, you know, this almost youthful thing is I want to look like everybody else. I want to dress like everybody else. You're going to lose that anyway, even if and it's going to be more painful if you're terribly attached to that. But I think if we look at the deeper tradition, we'll see that, you know, if we even read like Yoga Sutra, we'll see that asana is when your mind can, without effort, go into infinity. And you can have an extremely stiff person have a very beautiful asana. And then an extremely flexible person is simply, you can have an extremely flexible person also do excellent posture. That's important to remember. But you can be extremely flexible, triple jointed even, and wear the perfect clothing and not even really be doing yoga. And so I think the beauty of this is that we're going to keep asking, you know, what is it that really matters in the postures? And time is going to instruct us whether we want it or not. Anyway, thank you.
And I will just jump in here too, because the three of us, and it's so nice to meet you, Shana. But Richard, Shana, and I kind of have questions that are interrelated on this question about modifications. And the question that was posed to me was, you know, how do we incorporate into modifications difficulties with emotional and mental states that students turn up in? And the same answers apply to all of this. And you said it so beautifully. And in the last, Shana, you did. And in the last panel, when we were talking about the tradition and the lineage, or the actual yoga lineage that is passed down from generation to generation, as well as the way things are traditionally done, those are things to bring into your awareness as a teacher, but also as a practitioner, one's own practice. Like, how are the postures traditionally taught? And in the way Eddie said, tradition being something that can be established over the course of a couple of generations. Your grandmother's pie that was made and then passed down in a recipe form, or the subtleties that really are part of the lineage or the ongoing teachings. All of those are part of this form of practice. And for us now in Ashtanga, I would agree with this idea that what we have seen over the last number of years is a sort of narrowing, putting blinders on in some ways, in some Ashtanga settings, and not in all by any means, but where we are not finding it within classes, everyone of all diversities being there. Everyone is in the same kind of fancy clothing, and you don't have people who are trading a burrito for a class coming to class and being the ones who are most profoundly impacted. So it's what I see as one of my hopes for the 2020s and this coming year and on from here is that those of us who have really been in this practice for a number of years re-embrace that part of the practice that is not exclusive and that really welcomes people in whatever state they arrive to the practice in, so that it serves them. Because the point of the practice that is, as Eddie said, we come and we're looking for healing, and we are looking for something. And then if we look around and it's just cookie cutter, then we may leave. But if instead the teacher is able to see the needs, be present with the student, and really truly drop their own expectations aside and show up, become in synchronization with the student's breath, with the student's tone, their mind state, then we can, as teachers, serve the needs of the students individually. And specifically in terms of sort of emotional and mental states, we're coming out of a time now with the pandemic, and where we have not only been isolated, and some of us are not even coming out of it in different parts of the world, but in the US, I went to my first Mysore class a couple of days ago, and it was like both wonderful and sort of disorienting as a student. And so we're coming out of this state where we've had a lot of time to be introspective, and where we've had tremendous opportunity to look and decide, are we just going to jump back in to things the way they were? Or are we going to do what the yoga is inviting us to do, which is to look deeply, to look at what these postures really are beyond, oh, I can put my leg behind my head. The postures, so what if you can do that? What's going on when that happens besides, maybe the ego getting inflated, or maybe the back getting a herniated disc, or maybe it being a state of transformation. What is going on deep inside in these postures? And so as a teacher, when you have someone who comes in who's upregulated emotionally or distracted mentally, someone who really has difficulty bringing their breath and their bandhas and their focus into the core of the body, that's an amazing opportunity to do exactly what Shana was saying, where we show up for them and say, how do I give an opportunity for this student to drop in deeply? So a student with, and you've maybe been that student, as I have at times, or seen students who are, their eyes can't seem to focus, and they're looking at everyone who comes in the room, and they're their focus is bad. You can do even something like, for a few breaths, have them close their eyes, change things radically so that they can focus a little bit more internally. It might work, it might not. You offer a modification and then you show up again. You get the feedback, oh, that did help, or, oh, now they're really not paying attention. And then you proceed from there. And so the same is also really true with emotional upregulation that can happen, especially as we come back into the situation of being in a room with other live human beings and being vulnerable, which is what happens when you drop in deeply to your yoga practice. So it's a time of great tenderness and a time where we have the opportunity to really show up authentically on our mats, but also as the student, we show up authentically, and also as the teacher, showing up really with this concern to serve rather than dominate. So just my thought to close it up here from my end of things is that, you know, I really have benefited so profoundly from this form of practice, from the series, from the adjustments, from the consistency and the expectation that I practice daily, that I go deeply. That has been such a benefit for me personally. And I see it as a, you know, sort of a part of the Ashtanga system that cannot be taken out through modifications. And I too, over time, have had physical difficulties. I got an autoimmune disease that has on some days made it so that I can't even lift my arm over my head. On other days doesn't bother me quite so much. And so I've had to modify things. I came to the practice really stiff. I got a little less stiff. Now I'm stiff and not stiff. So we just do what we do. And that isn't what's important, whether we're stiff or not. What's important is that it's feeding us so that we can sort of have a bit more clarity in the course of the day. And when we're out on the street interacting with others, not on their yoga mats, we've taken yoga with us, and it's part of what we do all day, every day. So I think that without modifications that allow people who are mentally or emotionally not balanced, without modifications for those things, without those modifications for people with physical difficulties, that the practice doesn't work. And it's, you know, the idea of abhyasa and vairagyam, that you have this practice that is very strong and clear, but then you let it go. You have effort and release. You set it down on the, you know, kind of altar of awareness and reevaluate. And so it's a wonderful way to look at it within the context of, you know, an evolving system. So that was kind of how I took my question to heart and wanted to speak to it. So I thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think it brings, I mean, I'm conscious of time, and also Day has to leave partway through. So I'm going to say, what about, maybe I'll introduce maybe this one to Day first of all. What about modifications, even in terms of looking at people and what they want out of it? We're not all, you know, when we went to Mysore, most of us went to Mysore, you know, we had the time and the privilege to be able to do that and to dedicate our lives to that. But we've, you know, there's a question in the chat box to this end. We're faced with students who have yoga, you know, as part of their life. It's not their whole life. They have to go to work, they have children, they have responsibilities. So, you know, how do we suit the practice to them in this capacity, you know, and how do we take account of that? There was actually a question also to Shayna about how to modify in terms of the length of practice and, you know, the regularity of practice, because we're told you have to do this every day, you know. I'm just going to throw that out there, and I'll probably start with Day on this.
I agree with everything that's been said so far. I think that they're really thoughtful responses. Unfortunately, when I've been practicing yoga and Ashtanga also for almost 2 decades here, and I didn't always meet that same open-mindedness, wonderful attitude, unfortunately. But also being an Ashtanga student and being in a sea of people practicing with a 70 to plus people in a room, that's really hard to consider each individual person and their goals and their little quirks and balances, postural dysfunction. So I do think that if you are going to practice, you should be practicing in a smaller room with a little, or just some sort of a one-on-one connection somewhere in there. Because one of the things that I've found is that people come in with some sort of postural dysfunction or some sort of movement pattern dysfunction. And our idea, this is one of the major things that I've discovered and I started teaching and incorporating into my practice. And one of the things that I really realized was that our conventional notion of what it means to do a balanced practice is that we do a pose and then we do a counter pose, we do forward bend, we do back bend, we do right side 5 breaths, we do left side 5 breaths, and we treat every area of the body more or less with equal parts. And for certain people have an intolerance towards forward bending because they have maybe a posterior pelvic tilt. Or people have a certain intolerance towards back bending because maybe they have an anterior pelvic tilt. This is just off the top of my head. Or some people have an intolerance towards twisting in a certain way because they have scoliosis. So they should maybe, or they have their right side tighter than their left side or whatever it is. So it's really important to understand balance, not from our conventional thinking of what balance is, but to understand people and their needs. For instance, I'll just use myself as an example. I never knew that my right hip felt like it was 10 times tighter than my left hip until I did a couple years of yoga. And so that balanced notion of doing right side, left side, 5 breaths, I actually think is what exacerbated the imbalance. So in other words, if you have something that's off, and what I'm assuming is that nobody's walking in as the perfect specimen of the human machine that is our body, that we have to acknowledge that people are coming in with 1 or 2 repairs that need attention. And if that's the case, you walk in and you say, well, you know, you really have a preference towards external rotation on your right hip, but you really can't do it on your left hip. Let's skip external rotation on the right side and let's work exclusively on it on the left side. And maybe what you'll actually wind up with is something that leans more towards a balanced practice. Now, you can't do that in a room full of more than 20 people, let alone 70 or 100 people, which is kind of the current state of affairs. So you really have to be a teacher and a student who's willing to have some of these conversations and address balance in a much more intelligent, for lack of better words, approach. So when I say modification, I'm not talking about most dogmatic teachers out there, Ashtanga teachers out there would say, don't use a block, don't use a strap. I'm talking about, let's remove all back bends from your yoga practice. These aren't working. Or like, I'm talking about major modification, because I think we can all agree, without getting into too much argument on yoga philosophy, I think that yoga asana is ultimately meant to be a vehicle that makes you feel better and healthier in your body, so that eventually you can just sit comfortably in your own skin and maybe lead you toward down the road through the other yoga limbs into meditation, into samadhi. So that being said, if the body is that vehicle, we better get it right. we better learn a little bit more about what's going on in each individual body and pay a little bit more attention to that so that we're not actually exacerbating people's problems, we're making them better. So that's my big philosophy now as a teacher.
Thanks, Dave. Did that a kind of contribution on your original question? We kind of sidelined your question, but I mean, do you have anything else to say on? I mean, the original question they got was quite difficult, actually. So I knew what she was, the thoughts of Dave, because we've done a workshop together. And her original question, I'll just read it out to you, was: have the recent developments in our understanding of the body called into question or even undermined the original intentions of yoga? It's quite complicated, and actually wrote it with Eddie in mind. So maybe, Dave, do you have anything else to say? And then I'm going to ask Eddie the same question.
Good. I can't wait to hear Eddie's answer. Yeah, there's a couple things besides what I said and my general idea of I think that our programmed idea of balance is a little bit off. It's a little bit imbalanced. But besides that, there are some other issues, which are that I think we have understanding from a scientific point of view that we do not need to practice as long as we are practicing. So we do not need to do a 90-minute to 2-hour practice 5, 6, 7 days a week. And how we know that is from this idea of minimum effective dose exercise, MED. There's a book called Body by Science by Doug McGuff, who talks about 6 minutes worth of exercise. So 6 minutes of exercise being the effective dose of exercise to keep your body functioning. So I don't know about you, but you know, my time is valuable. And a lot of times when you're doing the same exact practice 5, 6 days a week, and it becomes this almost, you know, rote memorization, you're on autopilot. Sometimes you're like, well, I have to be at work, or I have to do something, or I have to get something done. You're just like, well, let me try and bust through the whole thing and get through it. And what should be a 2-hour practice, you try to do in an hour and 45 minutes. And damn, I've seen people do it. I don't think that that's not a very good way to practice. I think focus on a couple of the best things or the most needed things. Again, this comes to whatever your particular body or your particular student needs at the time, and address them in a way that's attentive, that's focused, and that has some element of intensity to it. So going back to the idea that our practice, I think, is oftentimes too long, is that other things that we know about the body and fitness is that most people are getting really healthy doing HIIT, high intensity interval training, whereas yoga 6 days a week is LIST, low impact steady state. So we need to have at least 3 days a week. We need to have bursts of energy. We need to sprint. We need to run. We need to get our heartbeat up. So I know one of the things about yoga asana is, oh, we always keep this calm, steady state. We always keep our breathing controlled, and it's actually really good and really healthy for us to get the hell up and move as fast as we can and do that at least 3 times a week. So yeah, I definitely think that there are some things that are missing in the practice that we can incorporate, which is something I try to do.
Thanks, Dave. That's great. Eddie, you want to say anything?
Well, I'm not supposed to get asked questions, Adam, because I don't know the answers to any of them. I love what Shana and Day and Mary have said so far. I think this has been really valuable to everybody. The only thing I'd like to add at this point, and this is, you know, I might be alone in this, I might not be. I'd like to quickly preface it by saying, when we talk about the extremely, let's say, you know, tunnel vision, Ashtanga Yoga teachers, stick to the method, do nothing else. You know, poses have to be done in a particular way. Like, I was one of those people for a long time. And that's how I started off. And so, and then that started changing for me at a certain point when I saw that things weren't working for me or working for some of my students anymore. And what I really had to do was remember why I started doing yoga in the first place, which was that it was better than LSD and cheaper, and I didn't feel like shit the next day. So I made that switch when I was around 19 years old from psychedelics to yoga, and I found deep meaning and purpose in my life, and it gave me direction. And then somehow I lost track of that. And I know when I lost track of that, and I know how I lost track of that. And I lost track of that when I started receiving adjustments in asanas. And so getting physically helped in poses was the thing that made me think poses were important. And that's what I started doing. That's what I started trying to attain. That's what I started doing to my students. And so I honestly don't believe in them anymore for my teaching. I understand the value of them for people. I think touch is a very wonderful thing, but there are a lot of ways that we can instruct and impart information. And I know that that was the thing where that was my fall from grace, when I thought to myself, oh, I want the teacher to do that to me again. And so I think that language is important, and the idea of modifications, the word modify a pose, is harmful language when it comes to instructing. I think even a variation makes you think that you're doing something different than everyone else. So I think we need to think about new ways of making people feel welcome and purposeful, like in the way that Richard spoke about the inner purpose of an asana, and also echoing what Shana and Day and Mary have already said as well. That as soon as we use modifications, variations, all these types of things, or the word adjustment even, all of these words indicate to us that we're not doing something right. We should be doing it a different way, or there's a better way of doing it. And then we get stuck into some of these patterns. Now, not everyone will agree with me, and that's fine. But that's where I am right now. So just so you all know, like, this is where I am. And into, just to, I shouldn't be talking anymore, but just to Dave's point about minimum effective dosage and all that. I practice for a few hours every day, but I don't do asanas for a few hours. I read text, I do worship, I do some pranayama, asanas, 45 minutes, not more than an hour ever anymore. And I also weave in some duns and some baituks and kushti and things like that for cardiovascular stuff. So that's where I am. I'm a fallen Ashtanga yogi, but I still love it anyway, and I teach it. Anyway, back to you, Adam. This commercial message is over.
No, that was good. Yeah, I wanted you to say something on adjustments. I think that's, I'm in agreement, to be honest. I shouldn't say what I think. So I will quickly pass it over. I think following this is Richard's question on, are we doing anything other than? Is yoga about Nirodha, or should we now amend what we're doing as teachers to teach to something else?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you, Eddie. The language is one of those things where if you name it, then you're paying attention to what you think it is rather than what it is. And that's kind of the eternal problem with language. But I think language is called vak, which which is always a paradox. And so this is an interesting thing. Yoga as stress reduction as opposed to nirodha. And I think traditionally, a lot of what we're doing, particularly when we start, but also when we might already have gotten to the point where we think we're good at it, is the mind, again, our confusion, will take us into some kind of story about ourselves. And this creates, although we might not be paying attention to how we actually feel, and this is a form of stress in which, I think I've achieved, perfection but there's part of my intelligence that is laughing in the background and says, ha, ha, what an idiot. And that is a form of stress. And within the various traditions, you have to, in a sense, pay attention to that. Can you actually pay attention to what's really happening for you emotionally, physically? And that would be stress reduction, in which, you know, you can watch your mind then, oh, I'll just sing a song or I'll do this. And that would be stress reduction. And then the term nirodha is, which I like to translate as suspend, or just like let it go. You never push it away. That's a dualistic thing, like yuck. This whole universe sucks because it's impermanent, and so you're pushing it away. But nirodha just means to like suspend it, meaning just like look at it in awe and wonder. And oftentimes this will involve something that rather than a physical challenge, it's the balancing internally of the prana, not externally. So you might be externally very asymmetrical, but internally you just feel that wonder. And this involves a seeing or an experiencing of, what term should I use? Of love, or of like connection to what really matters. And this is a form of, and this takes great courage. It takes great intelligence, in the sense of not being smart, but being just like kind of wise, seeing really what, or feeling, not just seeing and understanding, but feeling what really matters. And so nirodha is, you know, they talk about it in various texts, you know, and so, but nirodha is something that will involve resolving or understanding all, you know, everything around you, so that it lives inside your heart. And so, and you can't demand that of anybody. If you'd even demand it of yourself, then you're going to fall into the language trap, because you have a picture of what that looks like. But and so I think this idea of stress reduction is a very good way of looking at, oh, that's the practical on the ground. What do we do in the present moment, in the present crisis, with, you know, this mystery of our unique suffering and our unique problems. And then nirodha is that ability just to like look again, to ask questions again, and to actually act, you know, with, I think with great, I don't know if courage is the right thing, but it takes this, in the sense of Carl Jung, you know, it takes great courage to own your shadow, and that way then you can see other beings for who they actually are, including yourself. I mean, you got to be nice to yourself, whoever that is. Anyway, there's a lot there. Does that make sense?
Adam, sir, you are muted. The mantra for 2020.
Too much unmute and mute, so I'm just getting confused. So that was wonderful, Richard, and thank you. And we all enjoyed hearing those reflections. There's a couple of questions in the chat box about that, which I might try and return to, but I'm trying to keep time here. So we're going to move in a slight change of pace now to the internet and what we're doing online with yoga teaching. We've all, I think all of us, been teaching a little bit online at least. And you know, what does it mean? Like, if perhaps this is something here to stay. So Michael, I think you're up next, and you're perhaps someone newer to the bar, as it were, and an internet phenomenon with fantastic social media that everyone knows, everyone loves. And so you have the question from my hands, from my pen. While the internet has been a recent source of dissemination, you know, inclusivity or spreading yoga, perhaps it's perhaps rendering it more competitive and posture focused. What are your feelings on your engagement with it?
Well, thank you. First of all, I wanted to say thank you. It's an honor to be with great expert yoga teachers. And it's an honor for me, where I'm just an upcomer from Newark, New Jersey, to be here with everyone today. So thank you. To speak about the internet, luckily I have 12 years experience within IT and understanding the internet. So we could walk through into understanding why it's happening this way. And it's because right now we're reaching to a point where there's a lot of sources, a lot of information out there on the internet, and it's hard for people to figure out as to what source of information is true. Now, with that being said, now we have to look at Ashtanga Yoga, or yoga in the sense of how do we create the user experience or rebuild the user experience to where they could understand not only the tradition, but also asanas as well too. The problem is that now that it's been watered down within social media platforms such as Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, it's more of how do I catch the eye of the user or the client within those first 3 seconds or the 7 seconds, because they're not willing to listen throughout my whole hour session or 15 seconds or whatnot. Based off statistics, the average user goes on Instagram for about 2 hours and that's it. So it's more of, if you can impact me with something that is essential or whatnot, I'll listen to you. And the problem with the platform within the internet is that it only rewards you based off the people that follows you. So people who follows under like your teaching, let's say for example, you only have 1,000 followers, or people that follow you within the internet, it only broadcasts to only that amount. So then it becomes the question of how do I promote my brand, how to promote yoga to where it could attract a larger demographic. So this is where people have to water down the process a bit to where they can welcome more people in. And this is what creates the inclusivity. Because before it was very exclusive. It was more of, okay, when you're looking at yoga and you're seeing a Nikapada or someone has a leg over their head, only the people who are flexible enough to perform it would be interested in signing up. But now when you water down yoga and you make it more sporadic to where like, okay, anyone can join in, because we're focusing on just the asanas, not the tradition. It's not overwhelming. It's more simplistic than complex. It brings more people into the mix. So within Western culture is more of how do I cater to a larger demographic, because we're looking at countries where everyone pretty much practices either the same cultural tradition. There's more of a bigger percentage of that. Whereas United States is diverse. You're having different people of different crowds. So it's more of how do I make Ashtanga Yoga adaptable to a large amount of people using asanas and whatnot, because asanas is what people see and I can't explain them through text.
That was cool. Does anyone else want to say anything? Or I mean, we've been a bit of a monologue today. So any comments on anything so far? Anyone's had in one's mind that we'd like to raise?
I just want to ask a question for Michael. Michael, have you only learned Ashtanga Yoga through social media or through the internet, or have you been in?
Yes, actually, I was introduced to Ashtanga Yoga from the help of the internet. It all started from my jiu-jitsu teacher, who showed me an Ashtanga Yoga video on YouTube. And if it had not been for that video, I wouldn't have been interested into learning more. And within the pandemic, I wasn't able to go to a studio to receive the adjustment or to learn from an actual Guruji or fly to India. Instead, I learned it from my apartment in Newark, New Jersey, and ordered books and started doing research online to learn from myself. I would even watch Dave Swenson videos and review the videos after I've practiced, just to review and evaluate myself on how I did. So the internet became a really good source for me because I didn't have the funds nor the availability to learn Ashtanga, the method other has done within the past. So it became, just as you said, an internet lineage, you can say.
And I think that's an important point and a good thing. And one of the many reasons why we wanted you here with us today, Michael, because we're looking at 2021 and beyond. And, the reality is a lot of people are learning this practice or learning any practice without the benefit of a live teacher. And what's that experience like?
It's intense. I think one thing I've learned the most was just as the panel discussion they spoke earlier, was about having the guide and not the teacher, is where I learned to self-validate myself. And I learned from my guide, from my teacher, what the process was. He told me, you follow through some citations, you read this book. You read this book, this will teach you on standing sequence. So from there, it allowed me to think for myself and allowed me to see, okay, which parts of the book do I need for me to grow? Because one won't listen if you don't understand the client. If you don't understand the client into why they're coming and wanting to learn yoga, then the connection between the teacher and the student is going to create a discrepancy. And I've learned that within my experience within IT is that if you don't listen to the client, if you don't listen to what the person is looking for, then they're not going to listen to you because you're not giving the same respect back. So respect goes back in two ways.
Michael, have you been to any classes yet in person?
In person, not necessarily. I've been online with Eddie Stern. Eddie Stern walked me through the ropes, and it's been good because for me, it was more of like understanding to listen to Eddie Stern. So it wasn't much of Eddie Stern being able to press my hand down or adjust me. I had to really listen. And that's where that trust came in, because it's like, okay, I'm trusting my body with Eddie Stern. Well, as Eddie Stern's telling me, okay, Mike, you can twist your body. You can lengthen your spine a bit more. And to trust someone remotely, it's something that's passionate. That's something you don't normally would get within a traditional period. So now we're in an internet stage. The importance of rapport is so important.
So you reckon it would have been different if you'd learned in person?
It probably would have been different. I think if I learned it in person, it would be more intensive. I probably would have learned it through the teacher and looking at the teacher's eyes. Because for me as a student, I'm trying to understand the teacher's perspective onto why he's teaching me and how is he teaching me that way. Therefore, when I become a teacher, the same program, the same process is what I will learn to carry forward. Now, within a situation where you're in the internet and you're learning things on your own, you're learning a lot more because now you're understanding your body, but you're also understanding how the teacher is communicating to you about your body. So now I'm learning to communicate my body to other people who have the same body or people who may not have the same experience. Because I'm learning this as well too. How do I apply Ashtanga Yoga to people who practice jujitsu? Where people in jujitsu, a majority of them within my gym can't do a half lotus, or they can't do an Ardha Bata at all. So how do I cater to them to where I share my happiness of my journey to them to where they're not able to? And I can't rule them out and say, hey, because you're not able to perform a lotus, you can't be an Ashtangi. That's not the way to go.
Thanks. Building on for this, and again, we're running out of time. So Harmony, I'd like to ask you your question, which is, similarly inclined. Is the internet an important gateway in the teaching, or do we need to find deeper dimensions and other avenues from which to explore the yoga?
Well, first, I guess, hi everyone. Michael, I'm a big fan of your internet, Instagram, online, everything. Adam told me I was an old teacher, which I thought was absolutely ridiculous, but I'm feeling very old listening to you talk at this point. And a little bit reminiscent of the time before yoga was on the internet. And it was kind of like an underground secret club that, you had to get invited to by some friend on the street, and it was done in dungeons and basements around the world. So it was a very different time. And Richard and Mary, I sort of considered you the first, maybe some of the pioneers of modifying or altering or changing the yoga practice, and doing 6 postures in 2.5 hours, has changed my life. So rather than 6 minutes of 10 postures, it's the total opposite approach, which I think has a lot of value as well, in going deep and not just looking at the fitness side of yoga. So all of this comes down to the internet and where's it going, and Adam asked me to talk on the populist tendencies of yoga and mainstream social media, and as a follow-up to Michael's question. And I think he brought up so many good points about like scrolling through social media, and it's not really like a way to, have strong interaction or strong teaching. It's more of a place of advertising. And so you need to catch people's eye in order to draw them in. And maybe when you draw them in, you can then cultivate more of that relationship and that strong teaching. I think there's also a little bit of a difficulty in that it's not always positive. We have these images, we have this very superficial surface presentation of yoga that often limits people's understanding to what yoga really is. We think that it's the asana, we think it's this fitness thing, we think it's these postures. If you put an advanced asana on social media, you're going to get many, hundreds of likes probably. If you put yourself sitting in lotus even, which is a pretty advanced asana, it's just not, I guess, interesting for people, you get like 20 likes or something. So it needs to be something that's, that's crazy, contortionist, but that's not really what yoga is. It's not about contorting your body. It's about like the mind, the spirit, the connection of the heart and the mind, and cultivating all of these all of these virtues, of compassion and friendliness and ahimsa and all of the other things that we all know and talk about regarding Ashtanga yoga, the 8 limbs. And that practice. And I think in a way, the social media detracts from that. It takes away from that, and it kind of leaves people at a surface level. And that in order to really go deep, you have to have that connection with a teacher or with somebody at a heart level. And this kind of reminded me of something that was talked about in the first panel, this idea, the difference between education and transmission. And education seems like, sure, you can learn that from books. You can learn that from Instagram. You could learn that from YouTube. You could learn that from DVDs and videos. You can get a really good education, perhaps, in yoga. But the transmission, the feeling of being in someone's presence, that feeling of their energy, of their experience of yoga, is really difficult to, I think, portray over the virtual airways. You can get it a little bit. And I mean, I know many of you personally, I've spent time with you. And so, of course, when I see you on the internet, I feel your energy. I can hear it in your voice. I can feel your presence. And it's a beautiful thing. But if I don't know you, if I've never met you, haven't, I can kind of get it. But there's a really, that in-person transmission is super powerful. And as human beings, we're set up for it too. I mean, Eddie can tell you all about the science of mirror neurons and things that are embedded within our physiology as well, to become like those that we're around. And that's the whole point of the teacher-student relationship, in my mind, is that it's somebody you want to become like. It's somebody that you want to grow into. And by being around that person, you actually truly become a better person. You start to mirror their energy, their behavior, the way they do things. And I'm not really sure this can be done on the internet. Maybe if it's done in a one-on-one situation where you're having like individual coaching sessions, or you're really connecting with people in a deeply intimate way. Sometimes we've done some podcasts with like Richard and Mary, or even with other people, and we feel very like connected to them after you talk to someone for a couple hours about like deeper aspects of yoga, or being in someone's class, and you feel that connection, like you with Eddie, Michael, you can develop that personal connection. But it's a little bit different than when you're in the presence of a real human being, and like the heartbeats can sync and you can feel the energy like immediately in your sphere. So I think in-person teaching is really important, and that the social media aspect, although it can be a helpful advertisement, a helpful way of advertising, and maybe even a platform for educating people or for education, I don't know that it's going to embody that transmission of yoga. And then just like one other thing, you know, some of the like top teachers, like people here, you know, Mary and Richard, I think they have like something like 6,500 followers on Instagram. David Swenson has like 8,000. You know, Dina Kingsburg, who's another senior teacher that I respect, has like 500 compared to like Nude Yoga Girl, who has like 1.4 million, or Yoga Woman with 830,000, and you know, Yoga Girl with 2 million. And so the number of followers doesn't necessarily equal the quality of the teacher or the depth of their ability to transmit yoga, or the experience, the years of experience of the practice and the depth of that practice. And I think we get really confused because, like, even though we're intelligent, we're like not super intelligent sometimes. And we see like there's, you know, oh, 2 million followers. She must really be an amazing teacher and she can do all these contortionistic things, right? Whereas like, you know, someone else who's had like 40 years of yoga education and practice and teaching, and there's just so much depth and wisdom there. And I think we've all experienced that today with these teachers that are, you know, have practiced a long time, a lot longer than I have even. You know, there's real transmission that can happen. You feel it in how they speak and who they are. And so you know, I just think that it's confusing. The internet and online yoga can be a very confusing place. And I think there are also some really good examples like Shayna and Adam. You're trying to, and even Michael, you know, like have conversations. And I love like your Yoga Sutra stuff, Shayna. It's so good. It always makes me stop and like think and go a little deeper. And same with you, Adam. You bring up a lot of like really good questions, and it is helpful. So it's not all bad or all good, of course. You know, these things can really like make people think and make people stop and be like, oh, right, yeah, that's an interesting thing I haven't thought about. But the tricky part is like you have to get people to stop. And that's kind of what Michael was talking about, that it's very difficult sometimes to just get people to stop, you know, and read actually, or like go a little deeper. That often it's just sort of scrolling mindlessly, looking for contortionistic photos or beautiful images of, you know, people or beaches or something. So it's a little bit half as far as I'm concerned. That's my 2 pieces.
Okay, Michael. Yeah.
I just wanted to chime in a bit. No, I totally understand. I want to piggyback on what Harmony said. For me, I just wanted to just share it as well. So my reason of starting Instagram, just for people can see and understand from my perspective. I started in Newark, New Jersey with nothing at all. So for me, if I wanted to learn Ashtanga Yoga, it would have been difficult. And using social media as a platform for me to gain a transference and as well as relatability with other people who were trying to learn Ashtanga Yoga as well too, is what I found essential. And then from there, I was able to find more people that were interested in getting into yoga. But the big problem was them remaining motivated and committed. Because I know a good majority of folks who practice yoga practice in the studio, they practice in a group. Now, for me, I practice solo by myself and as individuals. So now we're seeing people who are able to develop Ashtanga practice, follow the traditions, reading the books from Rich Freeman, from David Swenson, Eddie Stern, and still follow the traditions and still become a role model for other people to follow. And that's where we need to focus and see, how are we using social media? Are we just going there to look at asanas, to look at the next capo so I can feel bad about myself next day? Or am I going there to see, you know what, there's other people who are able to become Ashtangis, and it's not just me who can be the Ashtangi. Like, I just learned from myself that I was the only person in Newark, New Jersey who practiced Ashtanga Yoga. And I found out even more that there's less people of my color or of my ethnic that practices Ashtanga Yoga. So for me, I feel like the minority, but I don't see myself that way, because I see myself more as an influence. And that's what the purpose of social media is to become an influencer, to influence more people to do the things that you do within your lifestyle. So you need to be a good example. And that's why for me, I put that pressure on myself. I know it's a big example because I'm leading the folks who are following me. So because of that, you have to lead by example. If I'm going to be that guy teaching every day, promoting Ashtanga, I gotta live it. I gotta embody it. My day consists of Ashtanga Yoga, Jiu-Jitsu, also working 9 to 5 in the IT office. So I don't have the chance to go to India, but I'm still able to fit Ashtanga Yoga into my life. And that's the incentive, is to promote and influence people that, yes, even though you have a busy life, even though you may not have your parents or everyone around to fund you or to put you in a better place, you may be independent by yourself, you're still able to develop Ashtanga Yoga to where you can apply it into your normal everyday life to make the obstacles a lot easier for you to become a happy person at the end of the day. It's about being happy. So just wanted to share that.
Fantastic. I think it's undisputably, I mean, it's the internet has been helpful in including, and getting people to feel a sense of community and people that couldn't have access to it before. From my perspective, it gives a lot more autonomy to the student as well. The student has to take some more responsibility, and also the student hasn't got the teacher there that they might, I mean, I love John Scott. He was my first teacher, but I became a mini John Scott. Around John Scott in person too much, the tendency is there to emanate the teacher and to become the teacher. And what you want is to become your own person, And so for me personally, the internet has been wonderful to have that barrier between myself and the student so they can become their own person in yoga and not some bad version of me, or even a better one. So with that said, Loretto, what are the benefits of the lack of immediacy in our relation to those we're teaching, and what are the drawbacks?
Thank you, Adam. Thank you all. Well, what you said recently, I think it's very important, like autonomy. This internet way of practicing, like via Zoom or whatever, Instagram, more Zoom. I mean, when you are in a room, in a virtual room with your teacher, you are developing a lot of autonomy, and that it's also related to what Eddie said about the adjustments. I think also that's a benefit of all this, because it gives you as a practitioner at home to the ability to develop more autonomy with the adjustments. You don't need the teacher anymore, which is weird, because it's also, for me, it's kind of sad because I like to adjust. But what Eddie said also made me think about it, and made me a little sad to feel that maybe we're not going to adjust anymore. We don't know. But going back to the benefits of these immediacy. I think in my reality, in my Latin country reality, I'm in Chile. I live in Chile. I think the most important benefit I've seen is to be able to transmit this practice to everyone. This practice before the internet or before the pandemic was mainly a privilege here to the eastern part of the city of Santiago de Chile, where I live. And that always was like something in my mind that this is not right. I mean, I was a privilege to be able to go to India with the help of my family, because it's really, really hard. And Santiago, the eastern part of Santiago, is not Chile. And Chile is a very unequal country, an extremely unequal country. So the yoga also has been very unequal for our country. I'm speaking about Chile but I think it's a Latin reality also. Yoga, it's a privilege. And now it's not anymore. Santiago, it's a very expanded city. And my shala is located in the eastern part, of course. And I've never get to have people in my shala from other parts of the city, because public transportation sucks. if you don't have a car, you can get here in the early morning class, to the earlier morning class. And now the early morning Mysore class is the most popular one, because I have people from all over the city that you could take like an hour and a half to get here. They're just there in their home, they connect. And I think that to me has been the most amazing thing in the pandemic. And also in Chile, you don't get too many yoga teachers in other places than 2 or 3 cities in the country. So this also has given us access to the other people around the country, and of course around the world, because you can have access to now with the internet to get to practice with Eddie on Sundays, talk to Harmony on your podcasts, see Michael on the Instagram. But still, I think the deepest part for me has been to put out this for everyone. Chile is a poor country, even though it's not, and we're in the OCDE. But this is political, I know, but this is yoga. And we want people to get this. Anyone in Chile can go to India. Not anyone, sorry, not anyone. Just a few people we have been there. It's not easy to get a plane and go study with great teachers. And now the internet, I think it's good. I think it's very good. So that's the big benefit for me. And the other part of the question was which are the inconvenience, right? Something, yeah, like, or what do I miss? I think I miss the breathing. Listening to the breath of the people in the room is what I miss the most. And I think what is losing, I don't know how to say it. I can't hear people breathing, and that's the weird part, the weirdest part, and it's missing. That's the main part that is missing for me. Adjusting also because I love to adjust. And what Harmony was saying, also this feeling of energy, the energy of a group, and the transmission between people, and the sense of community, which is still there, out there, and now it's more it's global because of the internet. When you have people in the room, there is something different, that is the connection, the physical contact, which I miss the most, I guess. But we have gained a lot, and also as schools, we have had to develop new skills. And since this pandemic has made us change, I think that's a great thing also. We all needed to move into something new and something bigger. Yeah.
Thanks, Loretta. That was, important points raised, that it actually, again, so much more inclusive. I've often had that thought that I'm going into a studio teaching in the centre of London, and there's most of the people that perhaps really need it don't have the access to what I'm doing. So it's this elitist privilege thing, and it makes you rather disappointed about what you're doing sometimes.
Yeah, totally.
I'm conscious of time, and our last panelist today is Corey, again, well, not again, but my companion from London, UK, and we're looking at how we might develop the skills then. If online teaching has certainly some pluses, What can we do looking forward again towards developing our skills on this platform? Because none of us have had training in online teaching. We've just had a go at it, right? And it seems to have worked okay, but in a further reflection, what can we do to make it better for everyone? Corey.
Okay, so thanks, Adam. It's nice to see you, nice to see everyone. And thank you for this conversation. It's really, really such an important conversation. I'm so glad that we're having it together. So I'm going to speak mostly to teaching on Zoom, as opposed to, I know that we've talked about the internet, which covers many different areas. I don't teach on Instagram. Maybe, I think Instagram is appropriate for more maybe instructional videos, but teaching I feel really needs that interaction with the student. So that's what I'll be speaking to. And I'll be speaking to Mysore in particular, as opposed to leg classes. And so in terms of the skills, I think it helps to talk about what the challenges are. I agree with everything everyone said about accessibility, and that's wonderful. But the challenges are, you know, sorry, I'm a bit nervous being last as well. So the challenges are the breath. As you said, we can't hear the breath. We can't read the energy. And the other thing is that, you know, it's a noisy space. When you're in the Mysore room, it's a very quiet space. And this develops the concentration and the meditation for the students. So basically the koshas, you know, this is this practice, we're doing a self-inquiry through our organism, through all the different layers of our being. And when we're on the screen, we've got this very disembodied visual image. So I think that in terms of the physical practice, it helps to let the student know how to best see them, how they can be visible. I say to my students to wear light colored clothing, because if they're wearing dark clothing, they tend to go into the shadows. It's nice to set the students up in a place where you can see them, help them with the camera. And it helps to have I think you have to be a bit experimental. I had a student who I was teaching her pincher, and she was in a room and she couldn't use the walls because it was her partner's place, and you know the furniture was very precious. So we had to work out, you know, well, I'm not there to spot you. You can't use the walls. How am I going to teach you pincher? So it requires being creative and experimental, and I think it helps to have a good knowledge of functional anatomy and movement to help with those things. To help, you know, in the room we can give people adjustments, but when we're not with them, we've got to help them to help themselves. So, you know, that knowledge is really important. So personally, I find specialists in different fields of movement and I study them. We have these great resources now everywhere. And that really helps me to be able to know how to work with people. So then if we go to the breath, so the lack of the breath, you know, this is a breath-based practice, isn't it? And you know, you can't hear the breath. There's no way around that. So occasionally we can ask the student to unmute to hear the breath. Often that's not appropriate. You know, how do we deal with that? I think that it helps to give regular reminders of the breath as we teach, to perhaps give workshops on Tristanam, on the importance of the breath, once a week or regularly give lead classes so they can get used to the breath there and understand how important the breathing is. I mean, for teachers, that's our cue. That's how we know whether the student is overstimulated in their nervous system or whether they're using their soothing nervous system. You know, so how do we, and I'm asking these questions because I'm hoping that afterwards we'll discuss this together as well. You know, how do we know whether the student, you know, is really stimulated? How do we know how they are in that posture? That's my cue as a teacher to know how to work with you. I've got some notes if I'm looking at them. And then the other thing is, so the energetic, not the energetic body, the emotional body, I can't feel the energy. We've talked about this, Harmony, you said this, you can't feel the energy of the student in the room. Again, that's a cue to, you know, is the student upset? Are they, you know, what are they going through mentally? We get a sense of that when we're in a room with someone. It's hard to get that sense on the internet. So I think it's really essential to remind students at the beginning of every class, I'm going to be giving you verbal adjustments. And if something doesn't feel right, just ignore me. If I give it more than once, which I might, and you don't respond, eventually I'll get the message. I know this is not appropriate for you today. So really giving them that confidence to ignore something if it doesn't feel right. And oh yeah, so I think it's also really important to be available to, you know, with this in mind, be available to students outside afterwards. You know, I have students WhatsApp me, email me. So if they have got something going on and we've sensed something's happening in the room, they can come and they can talk to me afterwards. So those are sorts of my sort of thoughts. But I'm sure there's so much wisdom in this room. I'm sure other people can add to that.
No, thanks, Corey. That was good, and I did kind of wonder how much interaction people are having with students outside the class, because I kind of feel in some capacities it demands more because you're online, so you need more interaction with each person. You know, so yeah, I also have, and I'm sure Eddie has loads.
I think that students are, you know, they don't really want to reach out to you because they don't want to intrude in your time. So I think that sensitivity is there. People don't take the mick, you know, they need to be encouraged to reach out to you, and it's very helpful. Oh, and the other thing as well about, so in terms of, you know, in the Mysore room, it's quiet and we can hear the breath, and online there's the constant talking. I think it's really important as teachers to be aware to leave spaces. You know, we don't have to be instructing constantly. You know, if there's like 10 or 15 minutes of no talking, it's fine. They're at home, you know, let them just hear their own breath and have quiet, not this constant barrage of noise in the background. So I think that's something to be really mindful of, and also how we use our voice in the room and not getting into conversations with people in the room that might be distracting to others.
Yeah, I'm very guilty of just chatting and talking way too much in my Mysore class, I think. I'm modifying that, as you can imagine. We're actually running out of time. Is anyone, any panelists that's burning to give a parting comment, or I'm going to leave it to Eddie to wrap this up tonight? And Michael, did you have something you wanted to say?
Oh no, it was just to piggyback on Corey when she was mentioning on different methods and skills that we can use now that we're moving to a remote environment. Like, I would just suggest to anyone who's already teaching within like the brick and mortar yoga studio to also learn the online teaching as well too, because it also takes adaptation as well too as a teacher, because there's not only learning within the brick and mortar, within the in-person, but it's also learning outside. One thing I told myself when I was taking RYT was, if I was to teach someone that was blind, who didn't want any adjustments, how would I go about cueing and teaching that person yoga? And I've always asked myself that whenever I went about teaching or teaching myself, because if I need to adjust someone and I'm remote, then that means I feel like I'm telling myself that I don't know how to communicate to that person overseas for them to know the places and the areas within their body to adjust. That's what Dave Swenson said. Yeah, pretty much.
I think Shayna brought up an interesting point in one of her Instagram posts as well about it being a much more economical way for teachers to also teach students, because as we all know, many of us who have had yoga spaces, yoga studios, they are not a very profitable business to run a lot of the times, a physical brick and mortar place. And so the online forum and classrooms have opened up accessibility for students as well, but also teachers to continue teaching more students and from all over the world, as Loretto mentioned as well. You know, it's become a global classroom instead of just a local classroom, and those are really positive things. And I think, Corey, you brought up so many wonderful points about how to, you know, make the environment more accessible for entering into that yoga, and the importance of developing relationships with the students, which I think is is the area that social media is a little bit, can be a bit distracting, not so much going into the depth of that relationship. But, it's been such a gift in this time to be able to meet online with all of you and to also be able to take workshops from teachers that I wanted to practice with, but couldn't afford to take the time away or pay for the workshops in person as well as flying and accommodations and all those things. So definitely the online classroom environment, I think, has been beneficial for many, many, many of us, both teachers and students as well.
And can you hear me? Yeah. Yeah. Shada. Another side of the accessibility area is not just that it makes it so that students have the ability to practice with us, but it also makes it so that different types of people have the ability to teach who couldn't teach before, simply because they couldn't work at a yoga studio that was only paying them $20 for a class. They couldn't teach, like it wouldn't work. And so it makes it so that now the teachers who before wouldn't have been able to teach because they honestly would have had to have like a 40-hour a week job and teach these little $20 yoga classes, and it was just impossible. So it's made it so that we have a more diverse teacher body as well. You have people from different walks of life who can now teach online because all the money goes to them. If they charge a student $20 for a class, they're getting that full $20 instead of $3 like they would at a yoga studio. So it allows us to hear different voices of teachers who are not coming from privileged populations. They also get a chance to be heard and to teach. And Harmony was talking about the people who have the 500 followers versus the 1 million. It's that same thing. You have teachers who actually have all of this knowledge, but they're like, I can't teach y'all for $3 a class. It's not happening. So I got to go bounce on over here to this 40-hour a week job. And now they're like, okay, now I can kind of make this work. And so we can have different voices, which I think is amazing.
Thanks, Shana. Just remember, we have to pay our taxes. Get in trouble otherwise. So back to you, Eddie, and let's wrap up. So Eddie was going to give a summary of everything that's gone on now, I believe. And
right. Thank you, Adam, very much. Thank you to all the teachers and all the students, which is all of us together, for gathering here today to talk about these things. Every age has its own challenges and its own changes that it goes through. We're not the first generation to have to figure out how to do things differently. This is the nature of the world, that something's going to come along that's going to cause us to have to adjust, adapt, accommodate, as Swami Shivananda said. And that's what we're doing now. And one of the reasons why we wanted to get together with everyone to kind of talk about that. And I think one of the things that comes up is that one of the important things about yoga, and the thing that yoga is moving us towards, is developing our faculty of discernment. And that the final discernment, of course, is the distinction between what changes and what doesn't change, nature and consciousness. So viveka khyati, the faculty of discernment, is the ultimate goal. Let's not say goal, but it's one of the things which is a crucial part of yoga. And when we apply that to our situation right now, what we're all using is the faculty of discernment to decide, well, what kind of a teacher am I? What kind of a student am I? How can I best, serve the students who are coming to me? How can I best make use of my time as a student with who I want to spend my time with? And for some people, online works very well. For other people, they really need to be, or desire, or want to be with a human being in the flesh. And we're not going to call any of those things better or worse. We're going to call them, what is the need of the teacher? What is the need of the student? And it's up to us to discern that and to welcome all of the perspectives and all of the avenues of doing that, because there are billions of people on this planet. Not all of them, of course, do yoga, but there's still a lot of us and everyone is going to need to be met in a different way. And so everyone here has brought their, not their viewpoint, but brought themselves in the way that they meet their students, either on a yoga mat in person or on a yoga mat through a screen. So I think I speak for both Adam and myself in really appreciating you bringing yourselves and sharing with us, all of us, how you view that. That's really valuable. I mean, I know most of you are not going to get this joke, but it's been on my mind for the past hour. And I just want to say that the proof of my great levels of inclusivity in this is that I'm a New Yorker and I invited someone from New Jersey. So, I mean, if that doesn't transcend all boundaries, if you're not from America, it might not be funny, but if you're from New York City, it's the funniest thing you ever heard. So, that being said, please let us know if this was useful for you, if you'd like us to continue and do it again. We invited a bunch of different people. Not everyone could come. For the participants and also the panelists, if you found this valuable and you'd like to do it again, please let us know. We love this conversation with you all. I want to give a shout out to Harmony's 24-hour fundraiser she did with Lara. I'd like to give a shout out to the Mariella's Friends of Ashtanga Yoga and Women in Ashtanga Yoga. That was wonderful, wonderful events. There are a bunch of fabulous things that have been going on. Bye, Day. Thank you very much. A bunch of fabulous things going on. And, you know, we consider that we're taking part in this global conversation in a new way like that. And if it's valuable, we will keep it up. Thank you. Peace.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming.